Boeing Starliner stuck on space station, as more leaks discovered. NASA accidentally broadcasts simulation of distressed astronauts on space station. DARPA's secretive new neutrino detector program could be a game-changer for global underwater military surveillance. Boeing Starliner stuck on space station, as more leaks discovered. NASA accidentally broadcasts simulation of distressed astronauts on space station. DARPA's secretive new neutrino detector program could be a game-changer for global underwater military surveillance.
Tesla pops 7% in pre-market after Elon Musk says he is set for victory in $56 billion pay vote. Raspberry Pi is now a public company. Microsoft sued by supercomputer creator over AI architecture.
Nearly a week ago, Chinese battery suppliers tied to Ford, VW should be banned, GOP lawmakers say. EU hits Chinese EVs with extra duties of up to 38.1%, and Czech carmakers warn tariffs on Chinese EVs could hit supply chains. Tesla to build Shanghai factory to make megapack batteries. US says structural issues in India and China ties, difficult to resolve. Iran hopes to finalize 20 years pact with Russia as Bagheri Khani meets Lavrov. China, Russia failed to stop UN meeting on North Korea rights abuses.
China-backed hackers exploit Fortinet flaw, infecting 20,000 systems globally. Hackers access Tile internal tracking tools, customer data. Microsoft issues patches for 51 flaws, including critical MSMQ vulnerability.
Apple refused to pay bounty to Kaspersky for uncovering vulnerability part of Operation Triangulation.
Dollar and euro trade halted on Russia's biggest exchange due to new U.S. sanctions. New U.S. wave of Ukraine sanctions includes targets in Hong Kong and mainland China. U.S. expands Russia sanctions to target LNG projects, chips, and David Cameron calls on Europe to turn off Russian gas to save Ukraine.
Blinken says U.S. will try to bridge Israel and Hamas gaps on Gaza truce. Time for haggling to stop, and Blinken says some of Hamas' proposed changes to a ceasefire plan in Gaza are workable and some not. Hamas seeks complete halt to war in Gaza proposal response. UN says record 120 million people forcibly displaced globally.
Hungary agrees not to veto NATO support to Ukraine as long as it's not forced to help out. French conservatives remove leader Eric Ciotti for backing Le Pen pact. Zelensky lands in Saudi Arabia for unannounced visit. Texas secessionists win GOP backing for independence vote. Oklahoma Supreme Court dismisses lawsuit of last Tulsa race, massacre survivors seeking reparations. Arizona man planned a mass shooting targeting African Americans at an Atlanta concert to incite a race war, U.S. federal authorities say.
New ride-sharing app Black Wolf is like Uber, but with drivers who carry guns. GameStop raises more than $2 billion by selling 75 million shares, capitalizing on meme frenzy. Boeing sales tumble as the company gets no orders for the 737 MAX for the second straight month. Under pressure from Russian censors, Mozilla removes anti-censorship extensions. Microsoft pauses rollout of Windows 11 24H2 preview build after announcing recall changes. Nintendo, Xbox, and PlayStation have all now abandoned Twitter X integration.
To counter ad blockers. Japan forces Apple and Google to allow third-party app stores and payments.
FBI official admits mistakes, vows to improve relations with Asian American communities as FBI asks scientists for trust in taking anti-Asian bias seriously. Sales of Chinese CCTV cameras surge despite UK security ban. Nearly 80% of Americans are concerned about the spread of disinformation, with Black people among the most targeted.
2025 BMW M2 gets 20 horsepower boost to 473 ponies, updated cabin. Honda launches long-awaited electric van starting at $15,550. 9 months ago, it had been announced that Honda unveils $10,000 electric N-Van E with 130 miles range that can power your home. Just a quarter of British people now think the UK should be outside the European Union. Germans increasingly dissatisfied with their lives, according to study. For the first time, Spain becomes the Euro country with the highest risk of poverty.
Senate Democrats launch probe of foreign payments to Jared Kushner's firm. Hunter Biden trial isn't changing U.S. voters' minds, Reuters and Ipsos poll finds. Bob Menendez used prosecutor's job interview to lobby for friend as Menendez prosecutor's star witness describes bribery scheme over brandy and cigars, and it has been reported that Bob Menendez files to run as independent for Senate while on trial.
To introduce legislation to rein in a fundamentally unaccountable and rogue Supreme Court, and U.S. Supreme Court in crisis of legitimacy, says AOC at U.S. Congress Oversight Roundtable. Senator Lindsey Graham says he will block Democrats' effort to unanimously pass Supreme Court ethics bill.
S-500 Prometheus air defense system now protecting Russia's Kerch Bridge, claimed by Ukraine's spy boss. Rheinmetall, Kyiv agree to start producing Lynx armored vehicles in Ukraine in 2024. Candias to unveil next-generation main battle tank at Eurosatory 2024.
Armenia to quit Russia's military alliance amid split with Putin. India urges Russia to return its citizens recruited by Russia's army after 2 killed. In Germany, union politicians demand conscription for women too.
Says Dutch MPs approve purchase of 4 Black Sword Barracuda submarines from Naval Group.
In the U.S., prices stayed flat in May as inflation hit plateau and Federal Reserve leaves rates unchanged, sees only one 2024 cut despite inflation progress. Philippine rate cut likely to come after Fed, finance chief says. Australia's unemployment rate dips to 4% as economy adds 40,000 new jobs.
China's Ant Group invests $2.9 billion in technology research last year. Apple becomes the first $1 trillion global brand. Nvidia's value triples, report says. Nvidia CEO Jensen Huang has a no one-on-one meetings rule for his 55 direct reports. Finland will host a NATO land command and troops. Putin claims he did not plan to storm Kyiv in 2022. G7 says Russia should pay almost $500 billion to Ukraine in compensation of damage.
Zelensky arrives in Switzerland as 92 countries confirm peace summit attendance. Switzerland receives 100 state guests for summit on peace in Ukraine. BRICS leaders not to attend conference on Ukraine in Switzerland, as Ukraine struggles to court Global South before Swiss summit. Putin discloses he spoke with Obama amid 2014 coup in Ukraine. 10 years ago, it had been reported as Vladimir Putin and Barack Obama engage in war of words over Ukraine.
U.S. designates Scandinavian neo-Nazi group and 3 leaders as terrorists. U.S. sanctions Israeli group, Sav-9, that attack aid convoys threaten peace. U.S. Justice Department announces anticipated distribution of at least $940 million to victims of state-sponsored terrorism in 2025.
Undercover Israeli spies posed as Palestinians and lived in Gaza near hostages to plot daring rescue mission. Hamas official says no one has any idea how many Israeli hostages are still alive. Hamas armed wing says Israeli airstrike killed 2 hostages in Rafah.
In Germany, a residence permit revoked because of Hitler picture in WhatsApp status. In France, the new left-wing coalition condemns the terrorist massacres of Hamas on October 7th. U.S. says Houthis seek allies and bid to upend global shipping.
Apple set to be first big tech group to face charges under EU digital law. Meta pauses AI models launch in Europe due to Irish request. Indonesia minister threatens to shut down X over adult content. CEOs tell CNBC Trump was meandering, could not keep a straight thought, and Joe Biden will make more gaffes than Donald Trump in live TV debate, poll suggests. Trump says pilots, like beautiful Tom Cruise but taller, told him UFOs exist. Joe Biden wishes Trump a happy birthday from one old guy to another.
FAA investigating how counterfeit titanium got into Boeing and Airbus jets. Southwest Airlines Boeing 737 MAX 8 plunged within 400 feet of ocean near Hawaii. China overtakes U.S. in global car sales for the first time.
There's an AI candidate running for parliament in the UK. Wrestling legend Hulk Hogan reveals stance on potential run for office. I know right from wrong, brother. In France, crisis at LR, as the exclusion of Eric Ciotti from the presidency, suspended by the courts.
Sonos privacy policy change suggests it might sell your data. Google faces GDPR complaint over privacy sandbox. as Austrian group accuses Google of tracking users on Chrome browser. Mozilla has restored access to extensions to bypass blocking in Russia.
World Bank boosts forecast. Strength of U.S. economy will support global growth of 2.6% in 2024. U.S. business travel industry responsible for almost 2% of U.S. GDP and 3.5% of employment in latest full-year figures. Donald Trump's income tax cut would cost average family $5,000, claims an economist. Recently, in CEO meeting, Trump promised more tax cuts.
Former head of NSA joins OpenAI board. OpenAI taps veteran of Nextdoor and Square as new CFO, dismisses IPO speculation. Reuters reported that Pentagon ran secret anti-vaccine campaign to undermine China during pandemic.
Tesla investors back Musk's $56 billion pay deal. Texas move.
South Africa set for new coalition government as the late Nelson Mandela's ANC is forced to share power, as South Africa's President Ramaphosa is re-elected for second term after a dramatic late coalition deal. Italy accused of scrapping safe abortion guarantee from G7 declaration, and Italy denies removing LGBTQ and abortion references from G7 declaration. Polish government plans 7.6% minimum wage rise in 2025. In the UK, fury as Nigel Farage brands Putin clever and says Ukraine should negotiate. Nigel Farage says he is leader of the opposition after Reform UK poll boost. Nobody knows how to deal with Nigel Farage, says former Labour strategist.
Alito says he's sure Congress wanted to ban a rapid-fire gun device, but sided with the ruling to overturn the ban anyway, as U.S. Supreme Court rejects Trump-era ban on bump stocks, gun accessory from Vegas massacre. Johnson says House will go to court for Biden recordings, after Department of Justice says it won't prosecute Attorney General Garland. Trump attributes presence of Russian ships at the port of Havana to Biden's weakness.
Reactor TB2S arrived in Romania. 1 year ago, Romania awards $321 million contract for Turkish TB2 combat drones.
U.S. submarine pulls into Guantanamo Bay a day after Russian warships arrive in Cuba. Vietnam seeks to gradually expand security, defense ties with U.S. As China ties deepen, Malaysia's Anwar Ibrahim says, geopolitics is no zero-sum game. Russia, Iran boosts trade turnover by 48% in Q1 2024. Turkey 90% likely to cede second NPP project in Sinop to Russia. North Korea building roads, walls inside demilitarized zone, announces Yonhap.
Bond king Bill Gross sells rare stamp for record $4.4 million. Ripple rejects SEC's $2 billion fine for unreasonableness citing Terraform settlement. Nigerian agency drops tax evasion charges against Binance executives.
Chinese submarines torpedo destroys amphibious landing ship during exercise. China nuclear arsenal reached 500 warheads in 2024, says think tank, and U.S. as many as 15 years behind China on nuclear power. Report says, UK risks missing out on nuclear supply chain. Rolls boss warns.
EU cybersecurity label should not discriminate against big tech, European groups say. EFF comment as, the UN Cybercrime Draft Convention is a blank check for surveillance abuses. In Ireland, journalists to sue GSOC, Garda Ombudsman, for scraping mobile data.
China targets EU pork in new anti-dumping investigation after Brussels EV action. Adidas probes China unit over large-scale bribery. As Adidas opens fraud probe in China after whistleblower letter. Canadian resident of China pleads guilty to selling Tesla secrets.
IDF warns Hezbollah is bringing Israel to the brink of a wider escalation. 4 days ago, Hezbollah launches rockets, drones at northern Israel military sites. Death toll from Israeli strikes on Gaza Strip exceeds 37,300, announced by Health Ministry. ICC must be allowed to carry out work without intimidation, say 93 member states.
Joe Biden pushes Gaza ceasefire deal in Eid message.
Trudeau says Russia needs to be accountable for genocide of taking Ukrainian children. Zelensky says he would hold peace talks tomorrow if Russia leaves Ukraine territory. Ghana president says Africa, greatest victim of Russian invasion's consequences outside Europe.
In Israel, Haredi leader Goldknopf on army draft says, "You don't want us and you don't need us." Poll shows rise in support by Palestinians for armed struggle, and AP reports that the Israel and Gaza war is wiping out entire Palestinian families, a branch at a time. French football captain warns against extremes before election, as Mbappé worried says, "We must not disconnect ourselves from the world," and Kylian Mbappé calls on all young people to vote, because the extremes are at the gates of power. A Swiss museum will remove 5 paintings potentially looted by Nazis. Police ask English people to exchange beer for marijuana at the Euro Cup, and Hamburg police shoot hammer-wielding man, ahead of Euro 2024 match. Russian forces kill 6 Islamic State-linked hostage-takers at detention center. Myanmar's Aung San Suu Kyi has been incommunicado for over 3 years, family says.
Scientists create and cage world's first AI commander in a PLA laboratory.
Rocket company develops massive catapult to launch satellites into space without using jet fuel, 10,000 times the force of Earth's gravity. Human missions to Mars in doubt after astronaut kidney shrinkage revealed.
Beijing offers pounds to repair Australia relationship. Australia and China disputes won't be solved in silence, Prime Minister says, and Chinese Premier agrees with Australia to properly manage differences, as Australia's Albanese and China's Li hold candid talks in Canberra. China to include Australia in visa waiver program, Premier Li says.
Ferrari beat Toyota to defend Le Mans title, as Ferrari repeat win at Le Mans, 499p triumphs in 24 hours 2024. Koenigsegg issues do not drive order for Jesco after incident in Greece. Hertz is giving drivers thousands off slightly used electric vehicles. 2 months ago, Bloomberg commented as, "How Hertz's bet on Teslas went horribly sideways."
Decision to upend bump stocks ban. Biden says the next president may get to name 2 Supreme Court justices.
Trump talked about executing people while in the White House. Former aide reveals. In the U.S., Senator Murphy says Supreme Court is readying to fundamentally rewrite Second Amendment after bump stock ruling. Mongolia opposition candidate beaten to death during election campaign. Trump hits back at claims he'd consider mandatory military service, and Trump threatens to cut U.S. aid to Ukraine quickly if re-elected. The number of powerful Russian glide bombs hitting Ukraine's Dnipro salient falls from 80 a day to 4 thanks to U.S. aid, officer says. The Telegraph reports as NATO in talks to deploy more nuclear weapons.
Burns sees no problems with Putin's participation in potential conference on Ukraine. 78 countries at Swiss conference agree Ukraine's territorial integrity must be basis of any peace, and 84 delegations support final declaration of Ukraine summit. Russia's BRICS partners refused to sign Ukraine peace summit declaration, and Zelensky again criticizes Brazil and demands the position of a civilized country.
China hands firms decades-old tax bills, hinting at funding woes. China leaves key rate unchanged on currency pressure, liquidity. China home price slump accelerates, despite more stimulus.